The car was moving at over 120 kilometers per hour on the dark Abuja-Kaduna expressway when Chaik's hand suddenly grabbed Zainab's arm with violent force. The dashboard lights cast eerie shadows across his face, transforming her older brother into someone she no longer recognized. "Sign the papers now, or I swear to God, Zainab." His voice was raw with rage and desperation, nothing like the apologetic brother who had invited her to dinner just hours ago. "Chaik, please. You're scaring me. Slow down." Zainab's heart hammered against her chest as she watched the speedometer climb higher. The dark highway stretched endlessly before them, with no other vehicles in sight. $600 million. Zainab, $600 million. And the old man gave you almost everything. Spit flew from his mouth as he screamed, one hand jerking the steering wheel erratically while the other fumbled with something beside his seat. It was father's decision. "I can't just—" Her words were cut short as Chaik suddenly reached across her body and yanked the passenger door handle. The door flew open, and the deafening roar of wind and asphalt rushed into the car. "Then you can have nothing." In one brutal motion, her own brother, the boy who used to carry her on his shoulders, who taught her to ride a bicycle, who promised to always protect her, planted his foot against her side and kicked with all his strength. Zainab's fingers clawed desperately at the leather seat, at the doorframe, at anything that might save her. But physics and betrayal were merciless companions. Her body tumbled out of the speeding vehicle, and the last thing she saw was the red glow of brake lights disappearing into the night as her brother drove away, leaving her broken body on the dark highway. The sound of her skull hitting the asphalt echoed like thunder before everything went black. Do you think she survived that push? Could anyone survive being thrown from a car at that speed? Stay tuned to find out how one woman's fight for survival became a story of incredible resilience and justice. Hello guys, welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, share it with your friends, and most importantly turn on the notification bell so you can get informed when I drop another amazing story. Drop your thoughts and reactions in the comments. If someone in your family betrayed you this deeply, would you ever be able to forgive them? Let's dive in. The morning sun filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows of the master bedroom in the Okonkwo mansion in Ikoyi, Lagos, casting golden rays across the face of Chief Emeka Okonkwo. At 68 years old, the pharmaceutical magnate who had built an empire from nothing now lay propped against silk pillows, his once powerful frame diminished by illness, but his eyes still sharp with the intelligence that had made him one of Nigeria's wealthiest men. Zainab Okonkwo sat beside her father's bed, carefully adjusting his medication schedule on her tablet. At 28, she was the image of her late mother, smooth dark skin, intelligent eyes that missed nothing, and a gentle strength that commanded respect without demanding it. Her white lab coat hung on the door, a reminder that she'd abandoned her promising research position at the Pharmaceutical Institute to become her father's full-time caregiver. "You should be in your laboratory, not playing nurse to an old man," Chief Emeka said, his voice still carrying traces of the authority that once made boardrooms tremble. "You're not just any old man, Papa. You're my father." Zainab smiled, checking his pulse with practiced ease. Her background in pharmaceutical research had given her the medical knowledge to coordinate with his doctors effectively. "Besides, my research can wait. You cannot." Chief Emeka reached for her hand, his grip surprisingly firm. "Your brother called yesterday. He says he's too busy with his investment firm in London to visit before the end of the quarter." The disappointment in her father's voice was unmistakable. Chaik, 4 years older than Zainab, had left Nigeria 6 years ago, promising to return often. His visits had become increasingly rare, reduced to obligatory appearances at Christmas and their father's birthday, and even those had stopped in the past 2 years. "He sent his regards, Papa. You know how demanding his work is," Zainab said diplomatically, though they both knew the truth. Chaik had built a comfortable life in London and saw little reason to return to Nigeria, even for his dying father. "You're too kind, my daughter, too kind for this world." Chief Emeka's eyes grew distant. "When I built Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals from nothing, I had 2 dreams: to heal Africa's sick and to leave a legacy for my children. I always assumed Chaik would take over the company, with you supporting him with your brilliant mind. But life has shown me who truly values family and who values only themselves. Before Zainab could respond, her phone vibrated. It was Victor, her fiancé. Dr. Victor Adebayo was a respected cardiologist at Lagos University Teaching Hospital, and they'd been engaged for 8 months. His message was simple. Thinking of you, how's Papa today? She smiled as she typed a response, grateful for Victor's consistent support during these difficult months. While Chaik had abandoned them, Victor had been present, visiting Chief Emeka regularly, consulting with his medical team, and providing Zainab with the emotional support she needed. The weeks that followed were a blur of medical consultations, medication adjustments, and quiet conversations. Chief Emeka seemed to know his time was limited, and he spent hours sharing stories from his youth, business wisdom, and most importantly, his hopes for the company's future. Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals should serve Africa, not exploit it, he told Zainab one evening. Too many pharmaceutical companies charge prices that put medicine beyond reach of ordinary people. Promise me you'll remember that profit without purpose is just greed. I promise, Papa, Zainab whispered, memorizing every word. On a humid Tuesday morning in September, surrounded by Zainab, Victor, and a hastily summoned Chaik who had finally returned from London, Chief Emeka Okonkwo took his last breath. Zainab held his hand as he slipped away, her tears falling silently as the machines registered what her heart already knew. Her father, her mentor, her hero, was gone. The funeral was a grand affair befitting one of Nigeria's industrial pioneers. Dignitaries, business leaders, and ordinary Nigerians whose lives had been touched by Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals' affordable medicine initiatives filled the Cathedral Church of Christ in Lagos. Chaik played the grieving son perfectly, his expensive black suit and practiced expressions of sorrow convincing everyone except Zainab, who noticed how quickly his tears dried when he thought no one was watching. 3 days after the funeral, the family gathered in the office of Barrister Oladipo, Chief Emeka's longtime friend and attorney. The reading of the will took place in a wood-paneled conference room in Victoria Island, with Chaik, Zainab, Victor, and several company executives present. Barrister Oladipo, a dignified man in his 60s, adjusted his reading glasses and began, I, Chief Emeka Okonkwo, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. The preliminaries dealt with charitable donations and provisions for long-time household staff. Then came the main provisions. To my son, Chaik Okonkwo, I leave 20% of Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals and associated holdings, along with the London property and investment portfolio. This represents approximately $120 million. Chaik sat forward, his expression confident. Zainab saw him mentally calculating his inheritance. To my daughter, Zainab Okonkwo, I leave 80% of Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals and all associated holdings, properties, and investments, including controlling interests in the company. This represents approximately $480 million. Additionally, I leave at a family home in Ikoyi, the vacation property in Abuja, and complete authority over all company decisions. The room fell silent. Chaik's face had gone from confident to shocked to furious in the span of seconds. His jaw clenched so tightly that Zainab could see the muscles working beneath the skin. There must be some mistake, Chaik said, his voice dangerously quiet. There is no mistake, Barrister Oladipo continued. Chief Emeka left a personal letter explaining his decision. With your permission, I'll read the relevant portion. He pulled out a handwritten letter, and Chief Emeka's words from beyond the grave filled the room. To those who might question my distribution of assets, I offer this explanation. Inheritance is not merely about bloodline. It is about character, sacrifice, and love. My son Chaik chose his ambitions over family, his comfort over duty, his life abroad over a father who needed him. My daughter Zainab sacrificed career advancement, postponed her own dreams, and gave up years of her life to ensure I did not die alone and uncared for. Chaik, you'll have enough to live comfortably, but you have not earned the right to lead the company I built with my sweat and vision. Zainab has proven herself worthy not through words but through actions. She understands that true success is measured not in profit alone, but in lives improved and communities served. My decision is final and legally binding. If either child attempts to contest this will, they forfeit their entire inheritance, which will instead go to the Okonkwo Foundation for affordable medicine. Choose wisely. Chaik stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against a hardwood floor. This is insane. I'm the eldest son. The company should be mine. Your father's wishes are clear, Mr. Okonkwo, Barrister Oladipo said firmly. The will is ironclad. I helped draft it myself. Zainab sat frozen, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. She'd expected to inherit something, perhaps equal shares with her brother, but this was her father entrusting her with his entire legacy. Chaik turned to her, his eyes blazing with undisguised hatred. You poisoned him against me. All those months playing the devoted daughter. This was your plan all along, wasn't it? Chaik, I had no idea. Liar. He slammed his hand on the conference table. You manipulated a dying old man to steal my inheritance. That's enough. Victor stood, placing himself between Chaik and Zainab. Your father made his decision based on your actions, not your sister's influence. If you'd been here, perhaps things would be different. Chaik's laugh was bitter and cold. Stay out of this, doctor. This is family business. He grabbed his briefcase and stormed toward the door, but paused with his hand on the handle. When he turned back, his expression had shifted from rage to something that looked almost like calculation. I apologize, he said, though his tone remained flat. This is shocking news. I need time to process. Zainab, perhaps we can talk later, just the two of us? Clear the air? Something in his sudden change of demeanor made Zainab uneasy, but she nodded. Of course, Chaik. We're still family. Yes, he said softly, his smile not reaching his eyes. We're still family. Then he was gone, leaving only the echo of his footsteps and a tension in the air that felt like the calm before a storm. Victor squeezed Zainab's shoulder. Are you okay? I don't know, she admitted, staring at the door through which her brother had disappeared. I don't know anything anymore. What Zainab didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that in that moment, Chaik had made a decision. If the law wouldn't give him what he believed was rightfully his, he would find another way. And in his mind, twisted by greed and resentment, there was only one obstacle standing between him and $600 million. His sister. The will has been read, and one sibling received everything while the other received nothing but rage. When greed meets desperation, how far will the brother go? Next chapter will reveal the shocking depths of betrayal that will leave you speechless. Subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't believe what happens next. Drop a comment. Should inheritance be based on love and sacrifice, or should it always be divided equally regardless of the children's actions? 3 days after the catastrophic reading, Zainab sat in her father's study, now her study, surrounded by leather-bound books and family photographs that told the story of the Okonkwo family's rise. She'd barely slept since becoming the primary heir to a $600 million empire. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. Her phone rang, displaying Chaik's name. She hesitated before answering. Zainab. His voice was humble, almost contrite. I owe you an apology. My behavior at the lawyer's office was unforgivable. Grief and shock aren't excuses, but they're explanations. Can we talk? Please. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. This was the brother she remembered from childhood, before ambition and distance had changed him. Of course, Chaik. I wanted to talk to you too. I'm in Abuja for a few days, staying at father's house there. Would you come? Just you and me like old times. We can have dinner, remember Papa properly, and figure out how to move forward as a family. Zainab glanced at the photo on the desk. Her, Chaik, and their parents at her university graduation, all of them smiling and united. That family felt like a lifetime ago. I'd like that. Tomorrow night, I'll cook Papa's favorite, jollof rice and grilled fish, the way Mama used to make it. Despite everything, Zainab felt tears prick her eyes at the memory. That sounds perfect. After hanging up, she immediately called Victor. Chaik invited me to Abuja tomorrow for a reconciliation dinner. The pause on the other end lasted a beat too long. Zainab, I don't trust him. The way he looked at you after the reading. He's my brother, Victor. Our father just died. Maybe he needs this as much as I do. Then let me come with you. No, Zainab said gently but firmly. This needs to be just Chaik and me. We need to heal this rift, and that won't happen with others present. I'll be fine. I promise. Victor reluctantly agreed, making her promise to call him when she arrived safely and before she left to return to Lagos. The next evening, Zainab's driver dropped her at the Abuja estate, a sprawling property in the exclusive Maitama district. Chaik met her at the door, wearing casual clothes and an easy smile that reminded her painfully of their father. "Little sister," he said, embracing her. The hug felt genuine, lasting just long enough to seem sincere. "Come in. Dinner's almost ready." The evening began better than Zainab had dared hope. Chaik had indeed prepared their father's favorite meal, and they ate on the veranda overlooking the illuminated garden, sharing memories of their childhood. He spoke about their father with apparent affection, apologized again for his behavior, and even asked thoughtful questions about her plans for the company. "Papa was right, you know," Chaik said, refilling her wine glass. "You always had the heart for this work. I was too focused on making money to think about making a difference." "You could still be involved," Zainab offered carefully. 20% ownership means you have a seat on the board. We could work together." "Maybe," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Let's see how things develop." As the evening drew to a close, Chaik offered to drive her back to her hotel personally. "My driver has the night off, but I don't mind. It'll give us more time to talk." Zainab texted Victor. "Dinner went well. Heading back to hotel now. Chaik is driving me. We'll call when I get there." Victor's response was immediate. "Be safe. Love you. Call me soon." They left the estate at 9:47 p.m., the Abuja night air warm and heavy with the scent of night-blooming jasmine. Chaik drove his Range Rover, and for the first 20 minutes, the conversation continued in the same pleasant vein as dinner. They discussed their mother, who had died when Zainab was 15, and the value she'd instilled in them both. Then Chaik took a turn that confused Zainab. Instead of heading toward the city center where her hotel was located, he steered onto the Abuja-Kaduna Expressway. "Chaik, where are we going?" "My hotel is back that direction." "I know a shortcut," he said, his voice oddly flat. "Trust me." The highway was nearly empty at this hour, with only the occasional truck passing in the opposite direction. The city lights faded behind them, replaced by the darkness of rural Nigeria. Streetlights became sparse, then non-existent. "Chaik, this doesn't feel like a shortcut. Please turn around." He didn't respond, just pressed harder on the accelerator. The speedometer climbed, 100 kilometers per hour, 110, 120. "Chaik, slow down." Fear crept into Zainab's voice as she gripped the door handle. "You know what's funny?" Chaik's voice had changed completely, stripped of all the warmth and nostalgia that had colored it all evening. "Papa used to say that I was like him, ambitious, driven, willing to do what it takes to succeed. But apparently, those qualities only matter if you're also willing to play nursemaid to a dying old man." "What are you talking about?" "Chaik, you're scaring me." $600 million, Zainab. The words exploded from him like a dam breaking. "That's what I should have inherited. That's what the eldest son deserves. But no, Papa gave everything to his precious golden daughter, the saint who sacrificed so much. The will was his choice. A choice you influenced. Don't lie to me. All those months alone with him, whispering in his ear, turning him against me. Did you tell him I was a bad son? Did you remind him every day that I was in London instead of wiping his ass and watching him die? I never said anything against you. Papa made his own decisions." Chaik laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "It doesn't matter anymore. Because here's the thing about inheritance laws in Nigeria. If you die without children, your estate goes to your closest living relatives. In this case, that would be me, your only sibling." The implication hit Zainab like ice water. "Chaik, where are you?" "I spent the last 3 days researching this. Papa's was ironclad, except in the event of your death. Then everything comes to me, all of it, no more 20%, the full 600 million. Zainab's hand moved toward her phone in her purse, but Chaik saw the motion and grabbed the bag, tossing it into the back seat beyond her reach. Going to call for help? There's no one out here but us, little sister. Just a brother and sister going for a drive that's about to end very tragically. Chaik, please, think about what you're doing. I'm your sister. We played together as children. You taught me to swim, remember? You promised Mama you'd always protect me. Mama's dead. Papa's dead. And soon, you'll just be another tragic accident on a dangerous Nigerian highway. The speedometer read 130 kilometers per hour now, the dark road rushing beneath them. Zainab tried a different approach, fighting to keep the terror from her voice. The company needs me, Chaik. I know the research projects, the staff, the initiatives Papa started. Without me, you won't know how to run it. The value will plummet. I'll figure out, or I'll hire people who know. What I won't do is spend my life in your shadow, taking orders from my little sister, while she gets rich off Papa's legacy. Then let's share it properly. I'll give you more than 20%, 40%, 50%. Just please, Chaik, don't do this. For a moment, she thought she'd reached him. His hands loosened slightly on the steering wheel, and his foot eased off the accelerator. Then his face hardened again. You'd promise anything right now to save yourself. But tomorrow, you'd go back on your word. Get lawyers involved. Have me arrested for extortion. No, this is the only way to be sure. His right hand left the steering wheel and moved towards something beside his seat. Zainab realized with horror that he was reaching for the passenger door lock. Chaik, no. Everything happened in a terrible blur of motion. Chaik's hand found the door handle and yanked it. The passenger door flew open with a metallic shriek, and the roar of wind and road noise filled the car. Zainab lunged for the dashboard, for the door frame, for anything that might anchor her. I'm sorry it has to be this way, Chaik said, and for one fleeting second, she saw genuine regret in his eyes, before it was consumed again by cold determination. His leg came up, and his foot planted against her ribs with brutal force. The kick was powerful enough to break her grip on the door frame. Zainab felt herself leaving the seat, leaving the vehicle, leaving everything she'd ever known. Time stretched impossibly. She saw the blur of asphalt rushing beneath her at deadly speed. She saw the red glow of her brother's brake lights already accelerating away, leaving her to die alone on this dark road. She heard her own scream cut short as her body made contact with the highway. The impact was beyond pain. It was obliteration. Her head struck first, a crack that echoed through her skull like thunder, then her shoulder, her hip, her legs, tumbling and breaking and tearing as momentum carried her across the rough asphalt. Each contact point registered new damage. Skin shredding, bones breaking, consciousness fragmenting. Somewhere in the distance, she heard an engine. Was Chaik coming back? Coming back to finish the job? Or was it someone else? Someone who might save her? But these thoughts were already fading, scattered like leaves in wind. The pain was too immense, too all-consuming. The darkness of the edges of her vision crept inward, offering the mercy of unconsciousness. Zainab's last conscious thought was not of her brother's betrayal, or her father's company, or the fortune she'd just inherited. It was simpler, more primal. Please, God, let someone find me. Let someone find me before I die alone on this road. Then the darkness swallowed her whole, and Zainab Okonkwo knew nothing more. 50 meters away, Chaik's Range Rover slowed to a stop. He sat there for a full minute, his hands trembling on the steering wheel, staring at the rearview mirror, where he could barely make out the dark shape of his sister's body on the highway behind him. What have I done? But the moment of conscience passed as quickly as it had come. He'd committed fully to this path. There was no going back now. Either she was dead, or she soon would be on this isolated highway with no witnesses, and no help for kilometers in either direction. Chaik pressed the accelerator and drove away into the night, leaving his sister's broken body behind. In his mind, he was already planning his next steps, how he'd report her missing, how he'd grieve publicly, how he'd claim the inheritance that should have been his all along. He didn't see the truck that would pass by 2 minutes later, didn't know about the driver who would find Zainab, and refused to leave her to die alone. Chaik drove toward his future as a murderer and heir, never imagining that his carefully laid plans were already beginning to unravel. Behind him, under the vast Nigerian sky, Zainab lay broken but breathing. clinging to life by the thinnest of threads, left for dead on a dark highway by her own flesh and blood. This is betrayal at its most unthinkable level. But sometimes our darkest moments become the turning point for our greatest comebacks. Will Zainab survive? Next chapter reveals her incredible fight for life and the allies she never knew she had. Smash that like button if you're rooting for her survival, and subscribe so you don't miss her journey back from the edge. What would you do if your sibling betrayed you like this? Let me know in the comments. The first thing Zainab became aware was pain, not the sharp, immediate agony of the accident, but a deep, pervasive ache that seemed to emanate from every cell in her body. The second thing was the rhythmic beeping of medical equipment and the antiseptic smell that could only mean one thing: hospital. She tried to open her eyes, but even that simple action required monumental effort. When her eyelids finally fluttered open, harsh fluorescent lights made her wince. The ceiling tiles above her were water-stained and cracked. This was not the pristine private hospital she would have expected given her family's wealth. "She's waking up. Nurse, she's waking up." The voice was male, unfamiliar, speaking Hausa with a rural accent. A face appeared above her. A middle-aged man with weathered features, kind eyes, and a white prayer cap. He looked relieved and worried in equal measure. "Easy, madam. Don't try to move. You've been hurt very badly." Zainab's lips moved, but no sound came out. Her throat felt like sandpaper. A nurse appeared, younger, wearing a faded uniform. She held a small cup of water to Zainab's lips. Small sips only. Very small. The water was warm and slightly metallic, but it was the most wonderful thing Zainab had ever tasted. As moisture returned to her throat, she managed to croak out a single word. "Where?" "You're at Zango General Hospital," the nurse explained gently. "About 40 kilometers from Abuja. This is Musa. He's the truck driver who found you on the highway 3 nights ago. He brought you here and stayed to make sure you were cared for. 3 nights. She'd been unconscious for 3 nights. Fragmented memories began to surface. The dinner, the drive, the realization of Chaik's intentions, the sensation of falling, of breaking. Her brother had tried to kill her. "My phone," Zainab whispered urgently. "Need my phone." "Your bag was found near you," Musa said, producing a battered designer purse that Zainab recognized as hers. But there was no phone inside. Perhaps it fell somewhere else on the road. Of course, Chaik had thrown her bag into the back seat. The phone probably flew out during the impact or was left in his car. He'd been thorough. What injuries? Each word was an effort. The nurse exchanged glances with Musa before answering. "You have a severe concussion, 3 broken ribs, a fractured left arm, a dislocated shoulder that we reset, and extensive road rash. Your left leg was badly damaged. The bone was broken in 2 places. Dr. Ibrahim performed surgery to set it with pins. You're very lucky to be alive, madam." Lucky. Zainab almost laughed at the word, but the movement hurt too much. Her own brother had thrown her from a speeding car, and she was supposed to feel lucky? "Do you remember what happened?" The nurse asked carefully. "The police will want to speak with you when you're stronger." Memory flooded back with crystal clarity. Every word Chaik had said, every moment of terror, the calculated way he condemned her to death. But even through the haze of pain and medication, Zainab's mind worked strategically. If she told the truth now, what would happen? She'd accuse a wealthy, connected businessman of attempted murder. He'd deny it, say she jumped from the car in a grief-induced breakdown, claim she was mentally unstable from their father's death. More importantly, if Chaik knew she was alive and talking to police, what would he do? He'd tried to kill her once. Would he try again, this time succeeding? "Accident," Zainab whispered. "Car accident. Don't remember details. Head injury." The nurse nodded sympathetically. "That's common with head trauma. The memories may return in time." Over the next few days, as Zainab's consciousness stabilized and the medications were adjusted, she began to grasp the full scope of her situation. The hospital was understaffed and underfunded, but the doctors and nurses gave her competent care within their limited resources. Musa visited every day, bringing fruit and newspapers, refusing to leave until he was certain she would survive. "Why did you stay?" Zainab asked him one afternoon, when she could finally speak, without pain lancing through her chest. Musa smiled gently, his weathered face crinkling with kindness. "My daughter is your age. I would pray every day that if she were lying alone on a dark road, someone would stop. Someone would care. Allah tests us by giving us chances to be that someone. How could I drive past and still call myself a good Muslim?" Tears slid down Zainab's cheeks, the first she'd allowed herself since waking. This stranger, this simple truck driver who probably earned in a year what she'd spent on handbags, had saved her life and asked nothing in return. Meanwhile, she learned from a newspaper's Musa brought that she was officially missing. The stories were front-page news. Pharmaceutical heiress vanishes. Chaik played his role perfectly, giving tearful interviews about his beloved sister's disappearance, offering a substantial reward for information, and pleading for her safe return. One article featured a photo from the search. Chaik with Victor, both looking devastated as they coordinated efforts to find her. Victor, her heart ached at the thought of what he must be going through, believing she was missing or dead, but she couldn't reveal herself. Not yet, not until she understood the full scope of what Chaik was doing, and had a plan to stop him permanently. On her 8th day in the hospital, a visitor arrived who would change everything. Mrs. Adebla Adeyemi walked into Zainab's room with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. She was in her mid-50s, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, her natural hair cut in an elegant silver streak style. "Miss Okonkwo," she said without preamble, "my name is Adebla Adeyemi. I'm a corporate attorney, and I believe we need to talk." Zainab tensed, wondering if Chaik had somehow discovered she was alive, and sent a lawyer to silence her permanently. Mrs. Adeyemi seemed to read her mind. "Your brother doesn't know I'm here. I worked with your father for 15 years, helped structure Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals, and drafted his will. When you disappeared, I found certain things suspicious. Then a hospital administrator who happens to be my cousin mentioned an unidentified woman matching your description in this hospital. I came to investigate." "How did you know it was me?" "Your father showed me photos constantly. He was very proud of you." Mrs. Adeyemi pulled up a chair beside the bed. "I need to know something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Did your brother do this to you?" For a long moment, Zainab said nothing. Then, finally, she nodded. "Tell me everything." Zainab did. Every detail of the dinner, the drive, Chaik's confession, the attempt on her life. Mrs. Adeyemi listened without interruption, her expression growing grimmer with each revelation. "He's already moving to have you declared dead," Mrs. Adeyemi said when Zainab finished. "Nigerian law requires a 7-year waiting period for missing persons, but he's hired lawyers to argue that the circumstances, your car found abandoned near a dangerous area, no withdrawals from your accounts, no activity on your phone, constitute sufficient evidence of death to expedite probate. Can he do that? With enough money and the right lawyers? Eventually, yes. But there's something else you need to know." Mrs. Adeyemi pulled documents from her briefcase. "I've been monitoring company activities. Your brother has already begun making moves, as if he controls the company. He's fired 3 senior researchers, canceled 2 affordable medicine initiatives your father spent years developing, and has been in discussions with a pharmaceutical conglomerate about selling Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals entirely." Rage cut through Zainab's pain. Her father's life's work, his dream of providing affordable medicine to Africa, being dismantled for profit. What can we do? We build a case, a real one, with evidence so overwhelming that his money and connections can't save him. But to do that, you need to stay dead a little longer. Over the next 2 weeks, as Zainab's body slowly healed, Mrs. Adeyemi worked tirelessly. She hired private investigators who documented Chaik's activities. She obtained traffic camera footage from the Abuja-Kaduna Expressway that showed his Range Rover at the location and time of the incident. She interviewed hospital staff who could testify to Zainab's injuries being consistent with being thrown from a moving vehicle. Musa provided a crucial witness statement describing the exact position he'd found Zainab, at least 50 meters from any vehicle, with injury patterns suggesting violent ejection rather than a typical collision. But they needed more. They needed proof of premeditation, of Chaik's intent to kill rather than a sudden violent impulse. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of the private investigators discovered that Chaik had researched Nigerian inheritance law extensively in the days following the will reading, visiting multiple lawyers and asking specific questions about what happened to estates when heirs died without children. His internet search history, obtained through a contact at his London internet service provider, revealed chilling queries. How long until missing person declared dead in Nigeria? Inheriting when sibling dies without will? Isolated highways near Abuja? And most damning, how to make accident look natural. This shows clear premeditation, Mrs. Adeyemi explained, spreading the evidence across Zainab's hospital bed. He planned this from the moment the will was read. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was calculated murder. As Zainab's physical condition improved enough for her to begin physical therapy, learning to walk again on her surgically repaired leg, her mental transformation was even more dramatic. The scared, injured victim was evolving into something else. Someone harder, more focused, driven by a purpose that transcended mere survival. She wasn't just going to expose Chaik. She was going to reclaim everything he'd tried to steal and ensure he faced full justice for his crimes. When do we reveal that I'm alive? Zainab asked during one of Mrs. Adeyemi's visits. Not yet. Let him get comfortable. Let him make mistakes. The more he acts as if the company is his, the more evidence we have of his fraudulent claims. Meanwhile, we're building an ironclad case. When we strike, it needs to be decisive. 3 months after the attack, Zainab was finally strong enough to leave the hospital. Mrs. Adeyemi had arranged for a safe house, a modest apartment in a quiet Lagos neighborhood where Zainab could continue her recovery while monitoring Chaik's actions from a distance. Musa visited her there on her first day, bringing his wife and daughter to meet the woman whose life he'd saved. Zainab embraced them all, these strangers who had shown her more genuine care than her own brother. I can never repay you, she told Musa, tears in her eyes. You can, he replied simply. When you reclaim your father's company, remember people like us. Remember that medicine should heal everyone, not just those who can afford it. I promise, Zainab said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. From her safe house, Zainab watched as Chaik systematically dismantled everything their father had built. The affordable medicine programs were canceled. Research into tropical diseases affecting the poorest Africans was defunded. The company that had once prioritized healing over profit was being rebranded as just another pharmaceutical corporation chasing maximum returns. She also learned that Victor had never stopped searching for her. He'd hired private investigators, offered rewards, and refused to accept that she was gone. The newspapers showed him looking gaunt and exhausted, a man destroyed by grief. Her heart ached knowing what she was putting him through, but Mrs. Adeyemi was adamant. Revealing herself too early would give Chaik time to cover his tracks, or worse, try again to silence her permanently. Just a little longer, Mrs. Adeyemi promised. We're almost ready. The final piece of evidence came from Chaik's own arrogance. For months after the attack, confident that Zainab was dead and his claim to the inheritance secure, he made a mistake. At a private party with business associates, recorded by one of Mrs. Adeyemi's investigators who had infiltrated his social circle, Chaik had too much to drink. My sister thought she was so smart, he slurred to a colleague. Papa's favorite. But intelligence doesn't matter when you're scattered across a highway, does it? Should have just taken the 20% and been grateful. The recording wasn't full confession, but combined with all the other evidence, it painted a damning picture of a man who had celebrated his sister's death rather than mourned it. It's time, Mrs. Adeyemi announced when she brought Zainab the recording. Tomorrow, Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals has its quarterly board meeting. Your brother has scheduled it, planning to officially announce his takeover pending your legal declaration of death. I think we should give the board a surprise they'll never forget. That night, Zainab stood before the mirror in her safe house, examining the woman who looked back at her. She'd lost weight during her recovery, making her features sharper, more defined. A thin scar traced along her left temple, a permanent reminder of the night her brother had tried to murder her. Her left leg still ached. Probably always would, but she could walk without assistance now. She was no longer the woman who had sat at her father's bedside, who had trusted too easily and loved too openly. That woman had died on the Abuja expressway. The woman who stood here now was forged in pain and betrayal, tempered by months of patience and planning. Tomorrow, Chaik would learn that you can't kill the truth. You can only delay it. "I'm ready," Zainab told her reflection. "Let's go get my company back." She survived the unsurvivable, and now she's about to show her brother that you can't kill the truth. When someone leaves you for dead, coming back to life becomes your greatest weapon. Next chapter will show you how Zainab orchestrates her comeback from the shadows. This story is about to get intense. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because the revenge phase is coming and it's absolutely brilliant. Have you ever had to rebuild yourself from nothing? Share your story in the comments below. The Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals headquarters stood as a gleaming testament to Chief Emeka's vision, a 15-story glass and steel structure in Victoria Island that had become an iconic part of the Lagos skyline. As Zainab's car pulled into the underground parking garage, she felt her heart hammering against her ribs, each beat reminding her that she was alive. She was here, and she was about to reclaim everything that had been stolen from her. Mrs. Adeyemi sat beside her in the back seat, reviewing final details. Security has been briefed. The board members have no idea what's about to happen. Your brother scheduled a meeting for 10 a.m. to officially announce his transition to CEO pending your death declaration. Zainab checked her appearance one final time in a compact mirror. She wore a tailored black suit that Mrs. Adeyemi had selected. Elegant, authoritative, and impossible to ignore. Her hair was styled in a sophisticated updo, and minimal makeup covered the faint scars that remained from her ordeal. She looked every inch the pharmaceutical heiress and rightful CEO. "The police are standing by?" Zainab asked for the third time. "Detective Okoye and his team are positioned outside. The moment you give the signal, they'll move in." Mrs. Adeyemi placed a reassuring hand on Zainab's arm. "Are you ready for this?" Zainab thought about the last 4 months, the pain, the betrayal, the slow resurrection of her body and spirit. She thought about her father's legacy being dismantled by greed. She thought about Musa and his family, about Victor's grief, about all the people who would suffer if Chaik was allowed to transform Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals into just another profit-driven corporation. "I'm ready." They took the private elevator to the 15th floor, where the executive boardroom overlooked the Lagos Lagoon. Mrs. Adeyemi's security pass, never revoked because Chaik had assumed she would remain a useful ally, gave them access to the executive level. They arrived at 9:55 a.m., 5 minutes before the scheduled meeting. Through the frosted glass walls of the boardroom, Zainab could see figures moving, board members taking their seats. And there, at the head of the table in her father's chair, sat Chaik. He looked prosperous and confident, wearing an expensive Italian suit, his hair freshly cut, and a Rolex glinting on his wrist that Zainab recognized as their father's. He was laughing at something one of the board members said, completely at ease in his assumed role. "Wait here," Mrs. Adeyemi instructed, positioning Zainab just out of sight of the boardroom. "Let me make the introduction." Mrs. Adeyemi walked into the boardroom, and Zainab heard her crisp, professional voice. "Good morning, board members. Before we begin today's scheduled agenda, I have a matter of extreme urgency to address. I'm sure you'll all agree that what I'm about to reveal takes absolute precedence over routine business." Through the glass, Zainab saw Chaik's expression shift from welcoming to wary. He'd been avoiding Mrs. Adeyemi's calls for weeks, probably suspecting she wouldn't approve of his company restructuring. "Mrs. Adeyemi, I'm not sure this is the appropriate time," Chaik began. "Oh, I think the timing is perfect, Mr. Okonkwo. You see, this meeting was called to discuss the transition of leadership following your sister's presumed death. But what if I told you that Zainab Okonkwo is not dead?" The room fell silent. Every board member's attention fixed on Mrs. Adeyemi. Chaik's face had gone pale. "That's ridiculous," he said, but his voice cracked slightly. "My sister has been missing for 4 months. The police investigation found nothing because you made certain of that, didn't you?" Mrs. Adeyemi's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "But unlike you, Mr. Okonkwo, your sister survived your attempt to murder her, and she's here today to reclaim what's rightfully hers." Mrs. Adeyemi gestured toward the door, and Zainab took a deep breath. This was it. The moment she'd been preparing for since she'd first opened her eyes in that rural hospital. She walked into the boardroom. The reaction was instantaneous and electric. Board members gasped, several rising from their chairs in shock. Dr. Alyamide, who had worked with her father for 30 years, pressed his hand to his chest as if having a heart attack. Mrs. Chun, the CFO, simply stared with her mouth open. But Zainab's eyes were locked on her brother. Chaik's face went through a transformation that would have been comical if it weren't so horrifying. Shock, then disbelief, then terror, and finally a desperate attempt to mask it all behind a facade of joy. "Zainab," he stood, arms outstretched as if to embrace her. "Thank God. We thought you were dead. Where have you been? We've been searching everywhere." His performance was impressive. Zainab had to admit, to anyone who didn't know the truth, he looked like a relieved brother overcome with emotion. But she knew the truth, and soon everyone else would too. "Sit down, Chaik." Her voice was calm, controlled, carrying the authority of someone who had looked death in the face and survived. "No more lies. No more performances. It ends today." "I don't understand what you mean." "Zainab, you're clearly traumatized from whatever happened." I said, "Sit down." The command in her voice made Chaik flinch. He sank back into the chair, her father's chair, and Zainab saw something in his eyes that gave her grim satisfaction. Fear. "For months ago," Zainab began, her voice steady despite the rage and pain flowing through her, "my brother invited me to a reconciliation dinner in Abuja. I went because I wanted to repair our relationship, because despite everything, he was still my brother. That night after dinner, he offered to drive me back to my hotel." She walked slowly around the boardroom table, making eye contact with each board member as she spoke. "But instead of taking me to my hotel, he drove me to an isolated section of the Abuja-Kaduna Expressway. There, while traveling at over 120 kilometers per hour, he informed me that he had researched Nigerian inheritance law and discovered that if I died without heirs, our father's entire estate would pass to him." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Chaik started to stand, but Dr. Alyamide, who had moved to stand behind him, placed a firm hand on his shoulder, pressing him back into the seat. "When I refused to sign documents transferring my inheritance to him, my brother opened the passenger door of a speeding vehicle and kicked me out onto the highway. That's insane." Chaik shouted, finding his voice. "She's clearly having some kind of mental breakdown. Board members, you can see she needs medical attention, psychiatric evaluation." "Mrs. Adeyemi?" Zainab didn't take her eyes off her brother. The attorney activated the large presentation screen at the front of the boardroom. "What you're about to see is evidence that has been verified by 3 independent forensic experts and reviewed by the Nigerian police force." The screen lit up with traffic camera footage, time-stamped and dated to the night of the attack. It showed Chaik's Range Rover on the Abuja-Kaduna Expressway, traveling at high speed. The resolution wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough to see the passenger door open and a figure fall from the vehicle. "No," Chaik whispered, staring at the screen with the expression of a man watching his own execution. "Traffic camera from kilometer marker 47. Mrs. Adeyemi narrated clinically. Note the time, 10:13 p.m. This matches the time Musa Ibrahim, a truck driver, found Miss Okonkwo unconscious on the highway approximately 2 minutes later." The screen changed to show Musa's written testimony, complete with photographs of where he'd found Zainab, her injuries, the position of her body, everything documenting the brutal reality of what had happened. Medical records from Zango General Hospital confirm injuries consistent with being ejected from a moving vehicle at high speed. Mrs. Adeyemi continued. "Dr. Ibrahim Bello, the orthopedic surgeon who treated Miss Okonkwo, will testify that her injury pattern is impossible to reconcile with any scenario other than violent expulsion from a vehicle." The screen changed again, this time showing Chaik's internet search history. The board members leaned forward, reading the damning queries. "How long until missing person declared dead Nigeria? Inheriting when sibling dies without will. Isolated highways near Abuja." "These searches," Mrs. Adeyemi said, "were conducted from Mr. Chaik Okonkwo's personal laptop in the 3 days following the reading of Chief Emeka's will. They established clear premeditation. That could have been hacked. Fabricated. Chaik's voice was rising, panic bleeding through. You have no real proof. Actually, we do. Mrs. Adeyemi pulled up the final piece of evidence. The audio recording from the party 4 months after the attack. Chaik's slurred voice filled the boardroom. My sister thought she was so smart. Papa's favorite. But intelligence doesn't matter when you're scattered across a highway. Does it? Should have just taken the 20% and been grateful. The silence that followed was absolute. Several board members looked physically ill. Mrs. Chen was crying quietly, one hand over her mouth. Chaik seemed collapsing on himself. All the bluster, all the confident denials, evaporated like morning mist. He looked at Zainab with something that might have been regret or might have been hatred. She couldn't tell and no longer cared. Why? The word escaped her before she could stop it. The one question she wanted answered for 4 months. Why couldn't you just accept the 20%? $120 million. Chaik, that's more money than most people see in a lifetime. Why did you need it all so badly that you'd kill your own sister? For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, because it should have been mine. All of it. I'm the eldest son. That's how it's supposed to work. Papa breaking tradition, giving everything to his daughter while I got scraps. It was an insult, a humiliation. Every day you had that company would have been a reminder that I wasn't good enough. So you tried to kill me. I thought. He stopped, swallowed hard. I thought I could live with it. I thought once you were gone and I had the company, I forget. But I haven't forgotten. Not for a single day. Good, Zainab said coldly, because what's coming next will give you decades to remember what you did. She nodded to Mrs. Adeyemi, who made a phone call. 30 seconds later, Detective Okoye and 4 uniformed officers entered the boardroom. Chaik Okonkwo, Detective Okoye said, his voice formal and final. You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Zainab Okonkwo, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit inheritance fraud. You have the right to remain silent. As the detective read Chaik's rights, 2 officers pulled him to his feet and handcuffed him. The expensive suit, the Rolex, the confidence, all of it meaningless now. He was just a criminal being led away to face justice. As the officers walked Chaik past her toward the door, he stopped, forcing them to halt. He looked at his sister, really looked at her, seeing perhaps for the first time the damage he'd caused and the strength she'd found in surviving it. I'm sorry, he whispered. Zainab held his gaze, her expression unreadable. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. The officers led him away, and Zainab watched him go, feeling not triumph exactly, but something else. Closure, perhaps, or simply the quiet satisfaction of knowing that justice, delayed though it might be, was finally being served. When the boardroom door closed behind Chaik and his police escort, Zainab turned to face the remaining board members. They stared at her with a mixture of awe, sympathy, and uncertainty about what came next. She walked ahead of the table, to her father's chair, her chair now, and sat down. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice carrying the weight of everything she'd survived and overcome, I believe we have a company to save. My brother has done considerable damage in 4 months. But Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals was built on stronger foundations than one man's greed can destroy. Mrs. Adeyemi will present documentation restoring all my legal rights and authority. Then I want department heads to prepare reports on every decision my brother made, every contract he signed, every program he canceled. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Dr. Oyemide, tears in his eyes, was the first to stand. Welcome home, Miss Okonkwo. Your father would be so proud. One by one, the other board members stood, and Zainab felt the weight of their support, their respect, and their readiness to follow her leadership. She had reclaimed not just her inheritance, but her purpose. As the board members filed out to begin implementing her instructions, Zainab remained seated, alone in the boardroom where her father had made so many decisions that had shaped not just a company but countless lives across Africa. She pulled out her phone, a new one, since her old one had been lost that terrible night, and dialed a number she'd memorized but couldn't bring herself to call until now. Victor answered on the first ring. Hello. Victor, she said softly. It's me. The sound that came to the phone was something between a sob and a laugh, relief and disbelief mixing in equal measure. Zainab? Oh my God, Zainab, is it really you? It's really me. I'm alive, Victor. I'm alive, and I'm coming to see you. We have so much to talk about. I'll be waiting, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I've been waiting for 4 months. I can wait a little longer. After ending the call, Zainab stood and walked the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lagos. The city sprawled before her, chaotic, vibrant, teeming with millions of lives, many of whom would benefit from the company she now controlled. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman transformed by adversity. The scars might fade, but the strength forged in that darkness would remain forever. She had survived her brother's betrayal. She had clawed her way back from death itself. And now, she would do what her father had always dreamed of, build a legacy not of profit alone, but of healing, of service, of making medicine accessible to everyone who needed it. I'm ready now, Papa, she whispered to her reflection, to the city beyond, to the future that stretched before her. Watch me show them what real leadership looks like. The look on his face was dead. Sister walked through that door, priceless. Justice isn't always swift, but when it comes, it's absolutely satisfying. But this story isn't over yet. Next chapter will show you what true victory looks like and why forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Subscribe now because the final chapter will leave you inspired and empowered. Do you believe in second chances, or are some betrayals unforgivable? Let me know in the comments. 6 months after Chaik's arrest, Zainab stood at the podium of the West African Pharmaceutical Conference in Accra, Ghana, looking out an audience of over 2,000 industry professionals, government officials, and healthcare workers. The conference hall was packed, with people standing along the walls because every seat was taken. They had come from across the continent to hear her speak, drawn by the story that had captivated Africa. The woman who survived her brother's attempt to murder her and returned to transform her father's company into a beacon of hope for accessible health care. My father, Chief Emeka Okonkwo, used to say that the true measure of a pharmaceutical company isn't found in its quarterly earnings or stock prices. Zainab began, her voice steady and clear. It's measured in lives saved, in children who survived diseases that should have killed them, in mothers who live to raise their families, in communities that thrive because health care is a right, not a privilege. The audience was utterly silent, hanging on her every word. 6 months ago, I learned the hardest lesson of my life, that betrayal can come from the people we trust most, that greed can corrupt even family bonds, and that sometimes survival requires more strength than we know we possess. She paused, her hand unconsciously moving to touch the faint scar on her temple. But I also learned something more important. That adversity doesn't define us. How we respond to it does. Over the past 6 months, Zainab had worked tirelessly to undo the damage Chaik had inflicted on Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals. The affordable medicine programs he'd canceled were not just reinstated, but expanded. The research into tropical diseases that primarily affected the poor, malaria, sleeping sickness, river blindness, received triple the funding it had before. She'd also launched the Chief Emeka Okonkwo Foundation, dedicating 30% of company profits to providing free or low-cost medications to underserved communities across Africa. The foundation had already established partnerships with governments in 12 African nations. But perhaps most importantly, she'd changed the company culture. Under Chaik's brief leadership, Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals had been turning into just another corporation chasing profits. Under Zainab, it became what her father had always envisioned, a company that, yes, made money, but never forgot that its primary mission was healing. The changes showed in more than just balance sheets. Employee morale skyrocketed. Talented researchers who had been driven away by Chaik's profit-first policies returned. The company's reputation, tarnished during those 4 months, was being restored and even enhanced. As Zainab's speech concluded, the audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. Healthcare workers from rural clinics who had benefited from the foundation's work. Researchers who finally had funding to pursue cures for neglected diseases. Business leaders who saw proof that profit and purpose could coexist. After the speech, as Zainab made her way through the crowd of people who wanted to shake her hand or share how Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals had impacted their communities, she spotted a familiar face waiting patiently at the edge of the crowd. Musa, the truck driver who had saved her life, stood with his wife and daughter, all three dressed in their finest clothes. When Zainab reached them, tears filled her eyes. She embraced each of them, causing conference security to pause in confusion. Why was the keynote speaker hugging what appeared to be ordinary attendees? "Thank you for coming," Zainab said. "Thank you for everything." "We wouldn't have missed it," Musa replied, smiling. "But I came also to thank you. My daughter started university last month, studying medicine, the scholarship you provided." "It's not enough," Zainab interrupted. "It will never be enough to repay what you did for me, but I'm glad I could help." She had not only paid for Musa's daughter's education, but had also given Musa himself position as a logistics coordinator for the Foundation's medicine distribution network. His knowledge of roads throughout Nigeria and West Africa was invaluable, and he could now support his family better than his truck driving income had ever allowed. "You gave me my life," Zainab continued. "The least I could do is help you build a better one." Later that evening, back in her hotel suite, Zainab video called Victor. They'd been married 3 months ago in a quiet ceremony at her father's estate, with only close friends and family present. Victor had wanted to wait, worried that she wasn't emotionally ready so soon after the trauma, but Zainab had insisted. "Life is too short and too uncertain to postpone happiness," she told him. "I nearly lost everything. I'm not waiting to celebrate what I have." Now Victor's face appeared on her screen, and just seeing him made her smile. He was in Lagos, managing his cardiology practice while she traveled for the conference. "How did the speech go?" he asked. Standing ovation, lots of tears. Several people asked for selfies. She laughed. "I'm not used to being famous." "You're not famous for being famous," Victor said gently. "You're famous for what you survived and what you're doing with that survival. People need to see that trauma doesn't have to be the end of your story." They talked for another hour about everything and nothing. His day at the hospital, her meetings with health ministers, their plans for the house they were building, whether they were ready to start thinking about children. Normal, wonderful, domestic conversations that Zainab treasured more than any business success. The next morning, Zainab had an appointment that she'd been both dreading and preparing for. Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison sat on the outskirts of Lagos, a sprawling complex that housed some of Nigeria's most dangerous criminals. Chaik's trial had concluded 2 months ago. Despite his expensive lawyers and attempts to discredit the evidence, the case against him was overwhelming. Traffic camera footage, medical records, witness testimony, digital evidence of premeditation, and that damning audio recording, all of it painted an irrefutable picture of attempted murder and fraud. The judge had sentenced him to 15 years for attempted murder, with additional years for fraud and embezzlement to run concurrently. With good behavior, he might be released in 12 years. He would be 44 years old, and the world he had known would be gone forever. Mrs. Adeyemi had handled the legal complexities of Chaik's 20% inheritance. According to their father's will, any heir who contested the will would forfeit their entire inheritance to the Okonkwo Foundation. Attempting to murder the primary heir certainly qualified as contesting the will. Legally, Chaik had forfeited everything. But Zainab had made a different decision. She'd established a trust containing his 20% share, approximately $120 million. The terms were specific. Chaik could not access the principal for 15 years. However, if he demonstrated genuine rehabilitation, taking educational courses, participating in therapy, showing remorse through actions rather than words, he could eventually access the funds upon release. "You're being too generous," Mrs. Adeyemi had warned. "He tried to kill you." "I know," Zainab replied, "but I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing it because becoming what he is, consumed by hatred and greed, is a fate worse than poverty. If there's any chance he can become a better person, that money might help him rebuild a life worth living. And if he can't change, well, the trust has provisions. The money will eventually go to the foundation anyway." Now, as Zainab sat in the prison's stark visitation room, waiting for Chaik to be brought out, she wondered if this visit was a mistake. Victor had offered to come with her, but she declined. This was something she needed to do alone. The door opened, and Chaik entered, wearing the standard-issue prison uniform. In 6 months, he'd changed dramatically. The confident, prosperous businessman was gone. This man looked older, thinner, his hair cut short, his eyes carrying a weight that suggested sleepless nights and difficult reckonings. He sat across from her, a reinforced glass partition between them, communication through phones on either side. For a long moment, neither spoke. "You look well," Chaik finally said. "The limp is barely noticeable now." "Physical therapy," Zainab replied. "The doctors say I'll probably always have some pain in my leg, especially when it rains. A permanent reminder of what you did." Chaik flinched, looking down at his hands. "I dream about it. Every night. The moment I kicked you out of the car. In my dreams, I try to stop myself, but I can't. I watch myself do it again and again." "Good," Zainab said without sympathy. "You should remember what you did. Every day. For the rest of your life. Why did you come?" His voice cracked slightly. "To gloat? To make sure I know how completely I failed. I came to tell you that I've set up a trust with your 20% inheritance." His head snapped up, confusion and hope warring in his expression. "What?" She explained the terms, the 15-year restriction, the rehabilitation requirements, the provisions for education and therapy. As she spoke, she watched his face cycle through emotions. Disbelief, calculation, suspicion, and finally something that might have been genuine gratitude mixed with shame. "Why would you do that?" he whispered. "After everything I did?" Zainab took a deep breath. "Because Papas will specify that you were supposed to get 20%. You forfeited it legally by trying to kill me. But I've been thinking about what Papa would want, really want, not just legally but morally. He wanted to punish your greed and selfishness, but he also loved you. He hoped you'd change. I don't deserve this." "No," Zainab agreed. "You don't. But this isn't about what you deserve. It's about what kind of person I choose to be. And I choose not be consumed by hatred the way you were consumed by greed." "I am sorry," Chaik said, and this time there was genuine emotion in his voice. "I know you don't believe me, and I don't blame you. But sitting in this cell for 6 months, I've had time to think about who I became, about what I threw away. Not just the money, our relationship, Papa's memory, my own humanity. I threw all of it away because I couldn't stand the idea of you having more than me." "Did you ever love me?" Zainab asked, the question she'd been holding inside since that night on the highway. "As your sister, did you ever actually love me, or was I always just an obstacle to what you wanted?" Chaik's eyes filled with tears. "I did love you. I do love you. That's what makes it so much worse. I loved you and tried to kill you anyway, because my pride and greed were stronger than love. How do you live with that? How do you forgive yourself for something like that?" "I don't know," Zainab said honestly. "That's something you'll have to figure out. But Chaik, if you really want forgiveness, not from me, but from yourself, you have to do more than feel sorry. You have to become someone different. Someone Papa would have been proud of. Is that even possible? After what I've done? I don't know. Maybe. But that's your journey to make." Zainab stood, preparing to leave. "The trust administrators will contact you about the educational programs available. I suggest you take advantage of them. 15 years is a long time. You can waste it in bitterness, or you can use it to become better. Zainab," he called as she turned to leave, "thank you for the trust, for coming here, for not destroying me completely when you had every right to." She paused at the door, looking back at her brother, this man who had once been her protector, then her would-be murderer, now just another prisoner in orange clothing seeking redemption he might never deserve. "I didn't do it for you," she said quietly. "I did it for the girl I used to be, the one who believed family was everything. She deserved better than to be murdered by her brother. So I'm giving her this, proof that even after the worst betrayal, she could still choose mercy over vengeance. Goodbye, Chaik." As Zainab walked out of the prison into the bright Lagos afternoon, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months, lightness. Not happiness exactly, but the release of a weight she'd been carrying. She'd done what she came to do, said what she needed to say, and now she could finally, truly move forward. Her phone buzzed with messages. Mrs. Adeyemi sending the latest quarterly reports. Profits up 23%. Foundation distributions reaching record numbers. Dr. Al-Yamid reporting that their malaria research team had achieved a breakthrough that could reduce treatment costs by 40%. Victor sending a simple message. Proud of you. See you tonight. 1 year after reclaiming her company, Zainab stood in a rural village in northern Nigeria, watching as healthcare workers distributed free anti-malaria medication to families who could never have afforded it otherwise. Children played nearby, their laughter filling the air. Children who might have died without access to these medicines. An elderly woman approached Zainab, taking her hands in weathered ones. You are Chief Emeka's daughter, she said in Hausa, which Zainab understood from her time in the north. He used to bring medicine to our village himself many years ago. We thought when he died, the medicines would stop coming. But you are here. You remembered us. I will always remember, Zainab promised. This is what the company was built for, not to make rich people richer, but to heal those who need it most. The woman blessed her in Hausa, prayers for long life and many children, for prosperity and peace. As Zainab walked through the village, seeing the impact of her father's vision continued through her leadership, she understood something profound. Her brother's betrayal, as terrible as it was, had forged her into someone stronger, more focused, more committed to meaningful work than she might have been otherwise. She wouldn't wish that trauma on anyone, wouldn't minimize the pain and terror of those months. But she also wouldn't let it define her as a victim. Instead, she'd chosen to let it refine her into someone who understood both the darkness humans were capable of and the light they could choose to embody. 2 years after Chaik's imprisonment, Zainab received a letter from him. It was the first communication since her prison visit. She almost threw it away unread, but curiosity won. The letter was different from what she expected. No excuses, no self-pity, just a straightforward account of what he'd been doing. Completing a master's degree in public health through a prison education program, volunteering in the prison's medical clinic, leading a support group for inmates struggling with greed and materialism. I'm writing not to ask for anything, the letter said in Chaik's familiar handwriting, but to let you know that I'm trying to become someone different. Someone Papa wouldn't be ashamed of. I know I can never undo what I did, can never give back the months of pain and recovery you endured. But maybe I can become someone who, if he'd existed 2 years ago, would never have tried to hurt you in the first place. The trust administrators told me about the conditions you set. I want you to know I'm not doing this work to access the money. Honestly, after being in here and seeing how people suffer without basic resources, $120 million feels obscene. If I ever get out, I'd rather use it to fund clinics in underserved areas than buy another luxury car. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that your mercy, undeserved as it was, gave me something to work toward, a reason to try to be better than the man who hurt you. Thank you for that gift. Zainab read the letter 3 times, looking for signs of manipulation or false sincerity. But it felt genuine, the words of someone who had truly confronted what he'd done and was trying, however imperfectly, to change. She didn't respond to the letter. Maybe someday she would, maybe not. But she filed it away, a document of a journey she hoped was real even as she remained cautious about trusting it completely. 3 years after her father's death, Alconquo Pharmaceuticals was awarded the African Union's Prize for Healthcare Innovation, recognizing the company's work in making essential medicines accessible across the continent. Zainab accepted the award in Addis Ababa, standing before African leaders and healthcare pioneers. My father used to say that every person who dies from a treatable disease because they can't afford medicine is a failure. Not their failure, but ours, Zainab said in her acceptance speech. This award honors not just our company, but everyone who believes that healthcare is a human right, not a luxury item. In the audience, Victor watched his wife with pride. Beside him sat Musa and his family, his daughter now in her 3rd year of medical school, dreaming of becoming a doctor who would serve rural communities like the one she came from. After the ceremony, as Zainab mingled with other award recipients and dignitaries, a young woman approached her nervously. She was maybe 22, wearing a modest dress and carrying a worn medical textbook. Miss Okonkwo, she said shyly, I'm from a small village in Zambia. 2 years ago, My little brother got malaria. We couldn't afford the medicine from the local pharmacy. But then workers from your foundation came with free treatments. They saved his life. Because of that, I decided to study medicine. I want to save lives the way yours saved his." Zainab embraced the young woman, tears in her eyes. These moments, these lives touched and transformed. This was what made everything worthwhile. Not the awards or recognition, but the knowledge that her choices were creating ripples of positive change across the continent. 5 years after Chaik's imprisonment, Zainab gave birth to her first child, a daughter they named Emeka, after her father, but using the female form. As she held her newborn in the hospital, Victor beside her with tears of joy streaming down his face, Zainab thought about legacy and what it truly meant. Her father had built a pharmaceutical empire and left behind millions of dollars. But his real legacy was the idea that business could be a force for healing, that profit and purpose weren't opposites but partners. Chaik had tried to reduce that legacy to mere money, and in doing so, had lost everything that mattered. But Zainab understood what her father had known. The true measure of life wasn't in bank accounts or possessions, but in the lives you touched, the suffering you alleviated, the world you left slightly better than you found it. "Welcome to the world, little Emeka," she whispered to her daughter. "You're named after someone who understood that the greatest wealth is using what you have to help others. I hope we can teach you that lesson better than it was taught to your uncle." As her daughter's tiny hand wrapped around her finger, Zainab felt the weight of responsibility, not just for this new life, but for all the lives that depended on Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals continuing to prioritize healing over profit. 7 years after the attack, Zainab received notice that Chaik was up for parole. He'd served just over 7 years of his 15-year sentence, qualified for early review due to his exemplary behavior, educational achievements, and genuine rehabilitation efforts. The parole board requested her input as a victim. She could recommend denial, keeping him in prison for the full term, or she could recommend approval, allowing him to rejoin society under strict supervision. Zainab thought long and hard about her response. She consulted with Victor, with Mrs. Adeyemi, with her therapist whom she'd been seeing regularly since the trauma. She reread every letter Chaik had sent over the years. They'd become more frequent, more reflective, documenting a genuine transformation. Finally, she wrote her recommendation to the parole board. 7 years ago, my brother Chaik Okonkwo attempted to murder me to steal my inheritance. The trauma of that betrayal will stay with me for the rest of my life. I still have nightmares. I still feel phantom pain in my leg on rainy days. I still struggle with trust, even with people I love. However, punishment without the possibility of redemption serves no one. Based on the evidence of Mr. Okonkwo's rehabilitation efforts, his education, his volunteer work, his genuine expressions of remorse, I believe he has done the difficult work of becoming a different person than the man who hurt me. I recommend parole approval with the following conditions: mandatory therapy for at least 5 years, community service focused on healthcare access for underserved populations, and regular check-ins with both parole officers and mental health professionals. Additionally, I recommend that access to his trust fund be contingent on continued demonstration of rehabilitation. I want to be clear, I am not doing this because I believe what he did was forgivable. I'm doing this because I believe in the possibility of human transformation, because I refuse to let his worst moments 7 years ago determine both our futures forever. If he has truly changed, he deserves the chance to prove it through his actions. If he hasn't, the conditions of his parole will reveal that quickly. My father believed in second chances, in honoring his memory. I choose to believe in them too, cautiously, with clear boundaries but genuinely. The parole board approved Chaik's release. 3 months later, he walked out Kirikiri prison, 7 years older and fundamentally changed. True to Zainab's recommendations, he threw himself into community health care work, using his public health education to establish free clinics in underserved areas. They didn't immediately reconcile. Zainab needed time, needed to see if the transformation was real and lasting. But slowly, carefully, they built something new. Not the sibling relationship they'd had before, which was gone forever, but something else. A connection based on acknowledgement of harm done, genuine remorse demonstrated through action, and cautious hope that people could change. 10 years after Chief Emeka's death, Okonkwo Pharmaceuticals was thriving beyond even his grandest dreams. The company had expanded to 20 African countries, established partnerships with governments and NGOs, and had developed 3 new affordable treatments for diseases that primarily affected the poor. The foundation had distributed over $500 million worth of free or subsidized medicine, impacting over 30 million lives directly and countless more indirectly through improved community health. On the anniversary of her father's death, Zainab stood at his grave with Victor, their daughter Emeka, now 5 years old and already showing signs of her grandfather's fierce intelligence, and their infant son Alyamide, named after the loyal board member who had supported her through everything. "We did it, Papa," Zainab said quietly, placing fresh flowers on the grave. "We took your dream and made it bigger. The company is everything you hoped it would be. Profitable but purposeful, successful but service-oriented." Little Emeka, who had heard stories about the grandfather she'd never met, placed her own small bouquet beside her mother's. "Grandpa was a good man," she said seriously, "like you and Daddy." "Yes, sweetheart. He was a very good man who understood that having much means owing much." As they walked back to their car, Zainab's phone buzzed with a message from Chaik. He'd sent a photo of a ribbon-cutting ceremony at a new community health clinic in a poor neighborhood. The 5th clinic his organization had opened in 3 years, all funded by his trust and sustained by his tireless advocacy work. The message was simple: "Thank you for believing I could be better. I'm trying every day to deserve that belief." Zainab showed the photo to Victor. "Do you think people can really change?" she asked. Victor considered the question seriously. "I think some people can if they want it badly enough and do the work. Your brother seems to be one of them. But that doesn't mean you have to forget what he did or be close to him. You can acknowledge his growth while maintaining your boundaries. I know. I just wonder sometimes if Papa will be proud of how I handled this, giving Chaik another chance, but not pretending everything is okay between us." "Your father was proud of you from the day you were born," Victor said, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "And he'd be even prouder now, seeing how you transformed tragedy into triumph, how you chose mercy without weakness, justice without vengeance." That evening, as Zainab put her children to bed and read them stories about kindness and courage, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the golden daughter caring for her dying father, through the nightmare betrayal and attempted murder, the long climb back to health and justice, and finally to this life she'd built, successful, purposeful, surrounded by love. The scars remained physical and emotional, but they were scars of survival, not wounds that still bled. And more than that, they were reminders of the strength she'd discovered within herself, the allies who had appeared when she needed them most, and the choice she made to let trauma refine her rather than define her. As she turned off the lights in her children's room and stood watching them sleep peacefully, Zainab understood the true meaning of victory. It wasn't in the destruction of her enemy, though justice had been served. It wasn't in the wealth she controlled, though she used it purposefully. It wasn't even in the legacy she was building, though it honored her father's memory. True victory was in becoming someone who could survive the worst betrayal imaginable and choose to respond with strategic justice rather than blind vengeance, with cautious mercy rather than perpetual hatred, with hope for transformation rather than certainty of irredeemable evil. Her brother had tried to kill her for $600 million. But what he'd never understood was that money was never the real inheritance. The real inheritance was the vision her father had given her, that success meant service, that power meant responsibility, that wealth meant opportunity to heal. And that inheritance, worth far more than any dollar amount, was something no one could ever steal. From being kicked out of a moving car to becoming a beacon of hope for millions, Zainab's journey proves that your darkest moment can become your greatest testimony. She didn't just survive. She thrived and transformed tragedy into a legacy of healing. What's the biggest lesson you're taking from this story? Share in the comments below. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that they can overcome anything. Subscribe for more incredible stories of triumph over tragedy. Remember, your setbacks are just setups for your comebacks.